Dragons. Yeah, they're pretty awesome. Everybody loves them. But I often find that writing a book about dragons, you start to think you've seen it all. But every now and then something comes along that surprises you. And a book that definitely surprised me when I read it is Serafina by Rachel Hartman. I actually read this in late 2012, which I'm pretty sure was the year it was initially published, on my Kindle because it was on a list of like editor's choice. I knew nothing about it other than that it had dragons. As the back of the book says, in the kingdom of Gored, dragons and humans live and work side by side, but below the surface, tensions and hostilities are on the rise. The newest member of Gored's royal court, a uniquely gifted musician named Serafina, holds a deep secret of her own, one that she guards with all of her being. When a member of the royal family is brutally murdered, Serafina is drawn into the investigation alongside the dangerously perceptive and dashing Prince Lucien. But as the two uncover a sinister plot to destroy the wavering peace of the kingdom, Serafina's struggle to protect her secret becomes increasingly difficult, while its discovery could mean her very life. I remember reading this book and just sort of having my mind blown. Its perspective that it took on dragons was one that I'd never really seen before. The idea that dragons could kind of disguise themselves as humans was so interesting, and the way that Hartman set up the world of Gored, especially the religion of Gored, which plays a huge part in both Serafina and its sequel Shadowscale, was something I'd never experienced. Yeah, trust me, when Shadowscale came out in like 2015, a 3-year gap between me reading Serafina and Shadowscale. I was over the moon. When I got that arc, I lost my mind. So of course, when I heard that Rachel Hartman was writing another book in the Gored universe, I had to get it. So I want to say thank you to Random House Children's, for approving me for a digital arc of this novel via NetGalley, but it does in no way color my review of this novel. Tess on the Road, while set in Gored and actually dealing with characters we'd met before, I'll get to that, is not really quite like Serafina. First off, Serafina was from the perspective of the title character, and Serafina has a pretty deep secret and a connection to dragons that the main character of Tess on the Road does not. And like I said, these are characters I've technically met before, but I was struck when I read Tess on the Road of how little I remembered Serafina's family. I mean, I vaguely remembered her father, and of course I remember her uncle more than I remembered her father, but I'd kind of forgotten she had a stepmother and 4 step-siblings, including 2 younger sisters and 2 younger brothers. I'd completely forgotten that. So needless to say, reading Tess on the Road, it took me a moment, basically until the book explicitly said so, to realize that Tess was Serafina's younger stepsister. Oops. This probably isn't a good thing, but I do want to point out that Rachel Hartman has long gaps between when she publishes her books. Between Serafina and Shadowscale, there was like a 3-year gap. And between Shadowscale and this, there's been like a 2-year gap. And I don't necessarily remember Serafina's family coming up a lot in Shadowscale, as, Serafina's traveling for a lot of Shadowscale, and her family ain't with her. This is me trying to excuse the fact I completely forgot about, like, these 5 characters who exist. Oh god. So needless to say, Serafina is not the subject of this novel. It is her younger sister Tess, and Tess is no Serafina. I feel it's unfair to say, as of course there's no way that Tess could be Serafina. To start with, she's not half dragon, and so to compare these two protagonists is basically an exercise in futility. They're incredibly different from each other, which is put into even sharper relief when Serafina actually shows up, and more than once. And while I was extremely excited that Serafina showed up a lot in this novel, and that certain things that happened at the end of Shadowscale were kind of made more clear in Tess on the Road, much to my great and just unending delight, it does put the characters in sharper contrast. It made it harder for me sometimes to like Tess, because I was like, oh, but like, see, this is why I really liked Serafina and why I really don't like Tess. The problem isn't necessarily that Tess is like totally unlikable. It's just that I found her really grating. She was a spoiled brat for a lot of the novel. And I feel like in a way, the novel at times tried to excuse her bad behavior. And I get into really murky territory because there are elements of the novel which explain, I think, some of her behavior in a way where I go, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, I get why she is the way she is. I'll be honest, at first I really couldn't grasp how Hartman could have written a character like Tess, one who was such a drag to follow and who did nothing to either endear me to her or invest me in her journey. And of course, the entire point of Tess of the Road is that it's more a journey of inner self-discovery and healing more than any sort of external plot. So starting with Tess as she is, it's worth it to follow her journey. Again, there were times where I sort of started to get it. And so I did sort of soften a bit towards Tess as the book went on, and really more especially by the end when Tess kind of has to come to terms with herself and her past and who she is and who she wants to be. Probably doesn't hurt that, you know, the reason I really softened toward Tess is because her mother is a heinous witch. That woman is so wildly unpleasant. I don't think I could have survived that house. I would have lost my mind. Everything about Tess's mother is the sort of thing that just like hits all my buttons and sets me off and makes me go, hard nope. Just hard nope. I'm not gonna, no. I hate her. The problem is that with a journey of inner self-discovery, and when you are essentially a road trip book, I want the road trip to still be fun. I want the plot to still be fun, and there wasn't much of a plot, or didn't seem like it for a lot of it. That's not necessarily to the novel's detriment, as it makes it fairly clear, again, this is more an inner journey of self-discovery for Tess than it is a true road trip novel of adventures. There is a road trip, there are adventures, but they're not necessarily the novel's true focus, and while that certainly does drag the pacing of what I hoped would be a faster, more fun novel, part of me was willing to continue powering through some of the many points where I considered pausing my reading. I did nearly give up on this book a handful of times, but I did actually read it also in one sitting, and I kind of knew that if I stopped, I might not pick it up for a while, and that would be really bad. Like, if I walked away from this novel for a while, we would have problems. Like, it would be hard for me to get back into it. In a way, I was sort of like Tess on her very own road, which she herself actually capitalizes at one point, knowing that if I paused my struggle or paused my journey, there'd probably be some severe detriment to myself in some way. I wouldn't get the full effect of the novel. Ultimately, this book is very backloaded in a way that made the book lack for me, because it's not a short book. It's like 544 pages, and the fact that all the stuff that I really enjoyed only took place in like the last 100 meant I slogged through 400 something pages to get there. And some of it didn't necessarily feel worth it. I feel like there was a better way to do parts of Tess's story. Maybe it had to do with the fact that I didn't like Tess nearly as much as Seraphina, that Tess on the Road lacked some of that magic, some of that spark, that something that made me really love Seraphina and its sequel Shadowscale. That being said, with all of my criticisms, I still think Tess on the Road is a great novel. It is great to get more in Gored and to get a completely different perspective on the world. Tess is not Seraphina. She has a very different life experience and like everything else, and so her perspective on some of the events, say that even happened in Seraphina or Shadowscale, is wildly different. And again, despite what I think is some clunkiness of it, it is still a really good story of self-discovery. There's a lot of important things that get brought up, and Tessa's story is one that I think might be healing for a lot of people to go through. Or like me, you get it, but you also just find it really frustrating because maybe you don't click with Tess. And this book does depend on you clicking with Tess. So if you don't, you're gonna find this a hard book to read, but if you click with her or you're willing to stick with her like I did, you'll be rewarded by the end. So for me, this very raw personal journey of self-discovery for Tess, it's like a 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. It's boosted by the fact that I love Gored and there were some really interesting world things that were brought up, but the actual character I didn't like as much. So I'm like, I can't quite give you 4 stars. Not quite at 3, you sit comfortably in the middle. I do hope that Rachel Hartman writes more in Gored, maybe just find a different heroine. Thanks for watching me ramble today. If you'd like to see more from me, go ahead and click that button with my face on it. It'll take you to my channel where I ramble about a whole lot of different things. Got some thoughts of your own? Go ahead and leave them down in the comments. And make sure that if you want to see more ramblings from me, you click that little subscribe button. That's it for me today, you guys, so until next time, cheers.